John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure.
No problem, man. No problem. I don't know if you know this, but I throw everybody into the deep end straight away when we start. So I ask you, in 10 seconds or less, what is it that you do?
That is a very difficult question to answer in 10 seconds. I've probably just wasted about 8 of it already. I spend 10 seconds starting now. Primarily father, secondarily businessman, and thirdly an athlete. I suppose those are kind of the three tiers that I put in order of what is really important in my life, and then everything else falls around that and is part of that bubble of three kind of things that I spend most of my time doing.
Yeah, I love that, man. Love that. And yeah, I suppose give us a little bit of context, John, to I suppose where you are now. If we rewind back a few years, how did you get into the fitness industry?
University. It was that classic. I believed the lie that if you went to uni and got a degree that you'd get a job, and it was a realization that actually a degree isn't really that relevant in sport and exercise science unless you want to go to be a lecturer or you want to try and get into elite sport, which is obviously incredibly difficult to get into and isn't particularly well remunerated for the most part. So in my final years of university, decided to get a qualification that I could actually use in the real world. That's not to bash the university degree, but the fact that a university degree doesn't allow you to coach people, but a 2-week course and a level 3 does, is for me still a travesty, but never mind. So yeah, became qualified and then started coaching, made all the mistakes you could imagine, failed spectacularly, went and got a proper job, as my mum would call it. And then a couple of years later, the lure of getting back into the fitness industry called me back and started part-time PTing. And then a year later, left my day job. A year later, I opened my first gym, grew that to at one point what was 4 gyms. Recently sold those, and everything else that's kind of come from there. Is that how it started way back in university?
And I think things are only after changing for you again. What, 2.5 months ago, you've sold your gyms. You're rebranding a new gym, and you're opening up a gourmet sandwich bar, if I'm right.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day. I've never actually sat down and counted how many businesses that I have. But so I've got a gym, I've got an online coaching company, I've got a gym mentoring company that works with other gym owners in how to be successful as a facility owner. I've got a coach education company, so we work on getting people qualified and capable, competent, and able to coach, so getting them level 3s and actually giving them real world experience. In May, we're opening a sandwich shop called Sangers. Check it out online. Sangers.deli is the Instagram handle. And then we're currently going through an application to register a charity, Miles for Meals, which is what the 48 is for. So yeah, so 5 businesses and a charity definitely keeps me busy, aside from before when I also had all of that and multiple gyms and everything else that was with it.
Being a father down top of it. Fair play, man. Yeah, I suppose that's one thing I do want to get into straight off the bat is the 48. So 48 marathons in 48 counties.
Yeah.
What's the last 48?
48 days.
48 days. Yes. Excuse me. Jesus, put a blank. Yeah. So, how did that come about?
Like most things that are a bad idea, whilst drunk with my rugby mates. So basically, I just done. If we go a couple of years ago, I did a 24-hour ski erg for charity to try and raise money for a terminally ill child that needed treatment abroad. And he ended up, the whole county came together. There's loads of fundraising. I think as a county, we raised, I think it was something like $500,000 or something insane. And anyway, the child went on to get the cancer treatment and is now cancer free.
Lovely.
And that kind of then lit a fire in me in terms of seeing how much more good we can do with our time and with our effort. And there's a lot of people that go, I do a lot for charity, and they'll just donate a bit here and there, and that's absolutely fine. But I think for me, I'm in a position now where I have more time to do more, and not just to be someone that donates, but someone that tries to generate more income, more fundraising, more impact. And it kind of came from the back of that, really. So it was, okay, what else can we do? And for the last year, I've done loads of different charity stuff as one-off or weekend events. So I did David Goggins 4448 as a group of 20 other people in lockdown that we did virtually all at the same time. We generated 25 grand for brain cancer research doing that. Then we did, I did the 100,000 meter ski erg world record, which generated, I think it was 4 grand in the end for Calm at the height of lockdown, where they were getting inundated with phone calls with people struggling with their mental health. Then ended up running the London Marathon on a hangover. That's another story entirely. Jesus. And then from there, it was, I just sat around a barbecue, just chatting. When also to add, it was at a time when we weren't in lockdown and the outside rule of 6 was allowed, so no lockdown laws were broken. But yeah, we were just chatting around what next, and there wasn't anything in the diary. And I had one eye on Marathon des Sables, but then I knew that that was probably going to get postponed because of the COVID pandemic. So it was something that I could do, that I wanted to take myself to the next level with, just something that wasn't just a day. I've always found I've learned a lot in these situations, and learned a lot about myself and my own personality, my own drive, my own physical ability. So we started talking about the Iron Cowboy, who I don't know whether you know, did 50 Ironmans in 50 days in the 50 states of America. And then, yeah, it was just after I'd run the London Marathon virtually, I think it was. So we then came up with the idea of 48 marathons in the 48 counties of England in 48 days. And that was the idea was born there, but I didn't really have a why. It was just to see if I could. And then in November, we got locked down again over in England, and it was, we wanted to do something. And then the whole child food poverty was quite big in the news, and it's something that I've got a personal relationship with, as I came from a household where my father fell off a roof, was disabled. We lived in a council house and lived on benefits, and for me growing up, having proper butter on my toast on a Sunday was considered a treat. So I've got a real close connection to wanting to try and make sure that no other children kind of experience those levels of hunger and living in a normal world, but not, if that makes sense. And anyway, so we ended up coming up with this concept called Miles for Meals, which was basically, as a gym, we committed to running, I think it was 3,000 miles to generate £3,000 of funding over the course of November. We ended up generating £10,000, which helped feed nearly 7,000 children over Christmas. And it was just a massive success. And then so from there, we decided to, other gyms were contacting me saying, that was brilliant, can we do it, can we borrow the model? And it was like, well, there's a thirst for this to be bigger than just Worcestershire. And if we go back to earlier around this idea of me wanting to have more of an impact than just coaching people, and having more of an impact on society and communities in the world that I live in, we thought, well, actually, why don't we try and turn this into a charity and something that we can then really make a go of? So found another couple of trustees that wanted to get involved. And then we basically decided that there were two aims of the charity. One is to raise awareness that food poverty does exist, because it's something that is a silent epidemic in the UK. It's growing, and there's so many people that are quite, not intentionally, but are ignorant to how bad it is and what it actually means. Excuse me. And then the second priority is to then raise funding to make sure that, now we're aware of it, how do we then stop it happening? How do we make sure these children and families that are living in poverty and food poverty aren't going to bed hungry? So that is obviously the obvious connection, is to raise money, but we didn't want to just raise money for a organization, because as we all know, money can just disappear in staff and costs and stuff that doesn't actually have any direct impact. And that's why we really enjoyed the November Miles for Meals initiative, because we worked really closely with our local food bank, and they actually showed us the impact that money had. So then ultimately the two aims: raise awareness, raise funding. And then it was, right, how do we raise awareness? And you got the usual social media ambassadors, getting people to share it and all that kind of stuff. But then the idea of a roadshow, taking Miles for Meals around the country, came about. And then that drunken idea popped back in my head. Well, 48 marathons in 48 days in the 48 counties would definitely take the Miles for Meals initiative on a roadshow. Can it be done? Can I do it? Is it possible? we'll soon see. So, and that was the idea basically. So it's trying to get ambassadors on board to help me find routes in their counties, to help with the logistics in their area, to engage their local communities, their running clubs, their rugby clubs, their schools, to run their own Miles for Meals initiative in that in their area, with an idea that in every county, even if we just generate £1,000 per county, that's still going to be over 30,000 children that will be fed as a result. But imagine if we did more. Imagine if every county ended up doing what Worcestershire did and we generated £10,000 per county. That's a huge impact in terms of making some real tangible difference to childhood food poverty. So that is kind of a whistle-stop tour of a drunken idea and the history that sat behind it, and then how it's then kind of morphed into where we are now.
So am I right in saying, just to kind of clarify it in my own head, when you're running in a specific county, other people are going to do it with you or virtually? Is that right? And they're raising kind of like their own separate fund towards it as well? Is that it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit like Red Nose Day, if that makes sense. So you've got the whole charity that's trying to raise money on one day, albeit ours is across 48 days. And then within that, we're asking the ambassadors in the counties to then run their own events, their own charity events that then feed into that bigger total. So I'm trying to generate £48,000 by my efforts. And the hope is that they will then get a load of ambassadors on board in the individual counties that will then also look to get sponsored to run the marathon with me in their county, or commit to X amount of miles across the 48 days that I'm running, so on and so forth. So you've got two kind of fundraising options of either sponsoring me for the work, the 48, or sponsoring local community groups that are then going to be running Miles for Meals initiatives. But we've already got 30 ambassadors signed up. We've got Run England and England Athletics getting involved and sharing it amongst their coaches and so on and so forth. So for me as well, it hits more than just the food poverty and the charity element of it. It's also actually getting people active, getting people outdoors, getting people exercising, which was also part of the reason why we did the Miles for Meals initiative in November when the gyms were closed, because everyone was having a bit of apathy towards training and a bit of demotivation and a bit of bored of Zoom. So it's like, well, let's get outside, let's get moving, let's get active. We're still allowed to be outdoors. And that's why the Miles for Meals initiative hopefully won't get derailed by if COVID suddenly spikes and summer gets affected, because again, they can all be done virtually. Outdoor exercise has never been stopped during the pandemic. So in theory, we'll still be able to generate funding and make a difference regardless of where we are in the world of COVID.
No, it's brilliant, man. It's going to have such knock-on effects as well. Like it's, and even the journey they're going to go on with that, it's going to be incredible, I'd say. But I think as well, you don't just come up with this idea overnight. I think the 24-hour ski challenge, that was like the first big thing you've done, is it? Or was there more before that leading up to that 24-hour?
No, so I'd gone on a weight loss journey myself. So I used to compete in fairly high level strongman. So I was won a few titles and traveled a little bit around Europe and competed and whatnot, and got up to 185 kilos in body weight. Ended up having to retire because of a knee injury, and then started to drop the body weight. And so over that time, I've kind of been a little bit lost in terms of having something to train towards or compete or to apply myself to. So that's part of it in terms of why I throw myself into it. But for the most part, there's not been a huge amount of thought or consideration into it. We decided to do the 24-hour ski erg on a week's notice with no prior experience on a ski erg other than 30-second intervals. I did the calm 100,000 meter ski erg on 16 hours notice. And the 4-4-48 on 2 weeks notice. So it's not that's the thing that this is the first charity challenge that I've actually trained for. And I've not just gone, right, where am I at what time? Right, let's go. Let's see what happens.
That ski challenge must have been brutal, man, was it?
Yeah, well, the ski challenge, it was, to be honest, like we'd done a few little bits around the gym to try and raise money for Oscar. And it was getting to the deadline date where he had to get a plane booked to get over. I think it was Singapore, or it was that kind of part of the world where they were doing the treatment. And they were still something like 40 grand short, and they still didn't have the full funding that they needed. So it was me and a friend of mine, Sarah. It was like, well, what can we do to, what's stupid enough that will generate a few grand, but is still slightly plausible that we might actually get it done. So we came up with a 24-hour ski erg where all of our gym members did a 24-hour ski collectively. Fundraising was fairly slow because the thing is, like, Worcester had been fairly exhausted by the fundraising scheme because it had been going on for a few weeks and everyone had already donated so much. So it was like, well, everyone you speak to, you're like, oh, I've already put 50 quid in or 100 quid in or a tenner in or whatever it was. So 24-hour ski erg for 50 people wasn't really that, not motivating or inspiring, but it wasn't having the sponsorship effect that we wanted it or hoped it would. So that's when me and Sarah were like, right, how can we take this up a level? And I just texted her saying, do you know if there's a world record in 24-hour ski ergs? And she texted me back about 10 minutes later with a link to the official world records. And she just said, if you're stupid enough to try it, I'll try it. So away we went. So she broke a world record and 2 British records. I did the same. And 24 hours later, lots of lessons learned, lots of questions answered, and then lots more questions asked in my own head of what more can be done, what else can I do, how far can I take myself, and it's just kind of gone on a spiraling effect from there.
Because like one question that I did get from some of the Instagram story I put out during the week was, what is the plan of action for getting out of any mental rut during the 48 challenge? So I think that there's probably some lessons from that, from the ski challenge. Like, what you definitely hit mental barriers during that challenge. What did you do during that point in time to keep yourself going?
The next thing. So this comes up a lot in terms of my coaching mantra and with people that I work with as a coach, and it comes up in a lot of sport and performance, is that whether it's I want to lose 10 stone, whether it's I want to run 48 marathons, like 2 fairly different ends of the spectrum, but at the end of the day, to lose 10 stone, you need to lose 1 pound, then another pound, then another pound. To run 48 marathons, you need to run 1, then the second, then the third, and so on and so forth. And I think the problem is, for many of us, and myself included, sometimes we just get massively overwhelmed with the whole goal. And I remember when I did my rugby coaching qualifications, the idea of whole part whole. So do something as a whole, break it down into the individual parts to then make the whole better. And that's how I view things like the 48, and how I try to push the idea to my clients, is this idea of focus on the next thing. When it gets hard, when your resolve gets questioned, if you make a mistake, if you order a takeaway when you know you should have had a salad, if you end up starting a marathon 3 hours late because you needed the extra sleep and now you're against it for the next marathon and you're tired or whatever, you can't control any of that. All you can control is your next step. And if you start thinking on day 24 going, shit, I'm only halfway, then it will overwhelm you. But if you think, if I do one more, that's now 25 done. Do another, that's now 26 done. So for me, it's breaking it down into small, measurable goals. Excuse me. And then just taking each individual step and applying your absolute best to that step. And there were times in the ski erg, so I remember it was about the 14-hour mark, and loads of the people around us were like, oh, you're nearly there. And you're like, fuck off, I'm not even close. 10 hours is a long fucking time when everything hurts. And there were times there when I was like, shit, can I do this? Like my feet, I've got still got nerve damage in my feet from standing in the same spot for 24 hours. I still can't feel my little fingers from where the handles were digging in on the nerve, and they've damaged the nerve in my hand. And there were all those times where I was like, I'm probably close to quitting, but it was just do another 10 minutes. And then when that 10 minutes was done, right, now just do another 10 minutes, and then another, and then another. And then before you know it, you've got 8 hours left, and then 4 hours left. And then you broke the back of it, and you know you're going to get it done. You just need to ride that wave and get you over the line. So I think I guess circling back around to the initial question, it's just focusing on the present reality, focus on where we are, what is the next possible positive step that I can make, and then doing that and applying myself to that in the best possible way that I can. And I know there's going to be challenges mentally, physically, spiritually. Like if I can get to the start line without an injury, that's going to be a win. as it is with the amount of training that is being done and will need to be done, let alone if I don't pick something up halfway along the way that I'm going to have to micromanage around however many marathons with niggles and injuries and pain. So, but if we worry about that, we'd never do anything. Like, same as opening a gym, same as a changing career, same as applying for a job. Like, if you think about the worst case, you'd never do anything in life. So focus on the best case, focus on the next step you can make to achieve that reality, and then let's get on with it.
It's funny that you brought up that next step thing, because I was only chatting with one of the coaches here yesterday, and this is literally like a method that we apply for some of our advanced trainee clients. Like, so, you know, they're a couple, 2-3 years under their belt training. They're getting really strong. They should really manage their load within sessions so they don't end up crippling themselves. And if we're doing high rep sets, so like 12 plus reps, 15, 16, 17, 18 reps on certain things, there's a little kind of mental switch that I get clients to do. So they, number one, finish the set with better quality, so it's not shit. And number two, that they actually finish the set when they're trying to push their boundaries a little bit, is break the reps up into 3 in their head. And it's kind of the same thing of like the next step, the next 3. So they're only focusing on those 3 reps at a time. So like even my own training at the moment, like I'm going through a seriously high volume training block with reps and whatnot. But 16 reps was kind of the theme of this week for certain exercises, and that's all I was doing. 3 reps in my head, right? Next 3 reps, next 3 reps, next 3 reps, and before you know it, you're on 15. Then it's just one more rep. I think the same. That's you're applying it on a macro level. I'm applying it on a smaller level, but it's the same kind of principle, really, isn't it? Just focusing on the next small bite-sized thing that you can do and keep plugging it from there.
That's the thing. Like, I've broken it down into the regions. In each region, I'll focus on getting that region ticked off and finished, and then before we then move on. So the way I'm going to work it is basically a regional hub in Yorkshire, for example. My parents live in North Yorkshire, so that'll be where I'm based for those 8 marathons, I think it is. So I know when I then move to the next hub, that's a massive piece of the jigsaw laid on the table. It's another stone built in the wall. So at the end of the day, it's like we've all been on like a 10K run, and 2-3K in, you're like, fuck, I've got another 7K to go. And if I'm thinking on marathon 1 going, I've got another 47 of these to do, it's just going to be soul destroying. So it's just get that marathon done, get that distance ticked, and then worry about the second marathon once I've got to the end line of the first marathon. And that's the thing, is like, if we start focusing on marathon 10, marathon 15, 20, 30, whatever it might be, we take the eyes off what we're doing in the here and the now. And that's where you get lazy, or you stop thinking about your running form and you pick up an injury, or you think, oh, actually, I feel all right. So you don't bother doing your recovery and you're stretching that night. And then you wake up in the next day in a world of pain because you've underestimated the challenge ahead, or whatever it might be. So I think there's danger in looking too far ahead, both negatively and positively. And I think all we can actually do in most things in life is focus on the reality of the here and the now, focus on what we can control it to the absolute best of our ability, and what will be. Like, I tried to do 100 miles in 24 hours for the Miles for Meals and got to mile 46 before something tore in my glute, and I had to retire at mile 46. And at the time, there was a state of messed up, I've let people down, I didn't achieve it. But then when you look back and you go, well, actually, I couldn't have trained any harder, I couldn't have prepared any differently, I couldn't have done, if I had to re-execute that plan, I wouldn't have changed the plan that I executed. It was just bad luck. It's just stepped off a curb awkwardly, and that was that. And I think that for me is what's helping me with my training now, is I never miss a session, because I don't want to be at marathon 32 and something fail me and think, oh, well, if I'd have done that strength session on February the 19th, would that have made a difference, instead of skipping it? So I think, again, even with my training and preparation for the 48, I'm not even thinking about the 48 right now. I'm thinking about, today I've got to run 12K. Tomorrow I've got to run 22K. The next day another 22K, and Monday a 10K. So that's all I'm thinking about now, is those 4 runs. And then before I know it, the next 20 weeks will be ticked off, and we'll be at the start line, and away we go. So the 48 is only coming into my head at the minute with the conversations like these. But my focus right now is the same way I'm going to attack the 48 is, what's the next thing in my diary? What's the next training session? What's the next thing I can do to push myself forward, to improve my fitness, my mental resolve, and my ability to give me the absolute best chance at the end goal, which is that first marathon on July the 5th.
That's brilliant, because the process for it started the second you started training for the 48. So, and even when the 48 does, quote unquote, you do that first marathon, you still have a process before you run, after you run, that night. So you're focusing on every single step involved. It's not just that day, but
Yeah, I
again,
mean, I was talking to my coach the other day about it, and I was saying, actually, I think the training for the 48 is actually going to be harder than the 48, because right now I've got homeschooling responsibilities, I've got my little girl, I've got all the businesses that I still need to run and be involved in, and everything else that comes with it. That for those 48 days when I'm running 48 marathons, my only focus will be running. So I actually think right now this is the hardest part. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not underestimating the difficulty of the 48, but in terms of mentally and physically, like trying to get enough sleep with everything else I've got going on right now is a major challenge. But on the 48, I literally run my marathon, eat my food, do my stretching, get back to base, go to bed. That's my day. Whereas right now I've got to fit in tomorrow, I've got to fit in a half marathon, as well as a half a morning delivering a level 3 coach education course, as well as checking in with all my online clients, as well as trying to see my daughter, and then hopefully actually having a little bit of a weekend. So it's again, it's kind of it's putting things in perspective and realizing that if actually I can get through the next 20 weeks of training with everything else I've got on and do everything that I need to, then as long as I can stay injury free, I've already done the hard bit. I just need to now express the hard work that I've done in the performance.
And one, like what you're talking about before that, just the whole process of it all. Again, it's a little kind of mental hack that we apply to some of our clients when we talk about the conversation of, oh, I couldn't be arsed going to the gym on X day of the week. And it's something that I do personally, and I know our own coaches do it, but like, we all get days where we just don't want to train. But like you said, you control what you can control. And that might be as simple as putting on your training gear. That's the next step. What's the next step after that? Driving to the location you're going to start the run, or getting out in the outside and doing your stretches before you run, or whatever it is. And we apply to the gym here. Like, the next thing after you get to the gym is do your warm up. The next thing after you do your warm up sets for your squats, whatever it is. And then you're focusing on set by set. Again, just breaking things up to bite-sized chunks. And before you know it, you've that day ticked off, or whatever that task is done. Yeah, brilliant, man. Brilliant. It just, I suppose, I'm interested to hear about the training you're doing at the moment. Like, what kind of, is it just kind of manipulating the volume to the legs, mileage? What way has it been done?
Yeah, essentially it's increasing time on feet progressively and sensibly. So my longest training runs tend to be Friday to Mondays, and then Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are my intervals, my different training modalities and recovery. So things like rowing session and a recovery session, and a short recovery run. And then throughout Monday to Friday, I'm still doing 3 strength sessions throughout the week. I think the stronger I am without having a negative impact on my running performance will make me more robust and more bulletproof in terms of picking up injuries and issues. So we started very slowly with only, I think it was an 8-hour training week in January, which compared to last year when I was training for the Ironman that never happened because of COVID, I was up to kind of like 18, 19-hour training weeks. So at the start of the month, I was only doing kind of 6 to 8 hours, whereas now I'm up at, I think this week will be a 14-hour training week, or possibly, no, 12-hour training week, and next week's 13, and the next one's a 14-hour week, and then we drop down into a recovery. So we're basically doing 3 weeks progressive increase, a lighter week, 3 weeks progressive increase, a lighter week, and so on and so forth. But because I need something shorter term to focus on, I've also got a 46-mile ultramarathon across the Malvern Hills in May. So that's kind of like the midpoint to then get us to July, if that makes sense. So yeah, a lot of running. We're not worrying about times, just worrying about heart rate, worrying about recovery, worrying about cadence, running technique, efficiency of movement, getting it done as simply and as injury free as possible. And then recovering and eating enough. And I made the mistake at the start of the year of trying to drop another 10 kilos. And it just didn't end well for my recovery and general feeling of tiredness and lethargy and motivation and can't be asked. We all know that calorie deficit feeling. So we've made the decision that actually we're not going to change. We're not going to diet. We'll just drop weight by the fact that we're ultimately moving more as the progressive load of running increases. So that's been a nice change, that for a long time I'm not actually in a diet phase with my nutrition. So progressively increasing distance, time on feet, getting used to being on my feet for 2-3 hours of walking and running a day. And I think at the height of our training peak, I think it's 2 or 3 weeks out, we'll run 3 or 4 marathons back-to-back days, and then that'll be pretty much the longest we'll go at that distance before we then get to the 48.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think the most I've ran the last year is probably a 5K done in an interval style format. So no, fair dues, man. It's tough going. It's tough doing all that running. I presume on a tarmacy road style, yeah, all road. Have you entered on soft ground?
Yeah, we're doing a couple sessions a week on the trails here. To use an American term, trail running. But yeah, the most part is all pavement, just for consistency of road surface. Last thing we want is a rolled ankle or a twisted knee because of a pothole on a hill on a sandy or rocky road. So, but I think the thing is to mention with this as well is it's perception of distance. So when I first started training for an Ironman, the idea of running 10K was beyond me, and I was just like, I'm a front row rugby player. I'm used to running short 5-meter bursts on a rugby field and scrimmaging, not running for an hour continuously. But the longer I've gone into the Ironman and the endurance and the ultra endurance stuff, then I remember when I used to not get on the watt bike. If I had a 2-hour watt bike session, I wouldn't get on the watt bike unless I had a carb heavy meal and unless I'd had enough hydration tablets in my fluid and I'd drunk 3 liters of water and I had all these carb gels around me. Whereas now, just 2-hour ride, I don't even have to think about it. I just put my bib shorts on and crack on. And it's the same with running. Like a half marathon, I used to have to mentally prepare myself for days and physically prepare myself with nutrition and hydration. And it's not to say that I don't respect the distance, but your perception of the difficulty of the distance changes the more you do something. And it's the same as when people start a fitness journey. They look at somebody that's training 5 days a week, living, breathing fitness, and it's just part of their life, and think, oh, I can never get to that point. But as soon as you get 2 sessions to become your routine, then it's easy for the 3rd to become part of your routine, and then the 4th, and then before you know it, you are that person. So I think that's something worth noting in any kind of fitness goal or any kind of goal really, is people's perception of me running 48 marathons might be different if they've never run before. But to the ultra endurance community, they're like, yeah, of course, anyone can run 48 marathons if you want to, because their perception of that distance is very different. And it's the same in business and finance and fitness goals and health goals, that at the end of the day, where you are now in your perception of something may be very different if you commit to actually slowly increasing your ability in that arena.
There is the downside though to people getting hung up on that perception too, thinking that, oh, I currently go to the gym 0 times per week, and they're looking at someone that is doing 5 days a week and they're like, I have to be that, where you don't, and they don't start at a level that they're capable of starting and build it up from there. I know I'm saying there, the thoughts of doing 10K to me now is just no, man. But if I was out going back running, I'd start probably a very, very easy 2K on the first day just to condition my legs again, and then slowly build that weekly. So I actually enjoy it.
I think that's the thing, is we were saying off recording earlier, this idea of measuring success by your own yardstick. So many people go, well, I want to achieve X, but to do that, I've got to do Y because that's what that person does. And it's like, well, no, their reality might be different. They might not have kids. They might be single. They might be employed rather than a business owner. Not that that's potentially any difference in time and stress, but you know where I'm going with it. Yeah. So actually, what is your reality, and what's the thing you can do to make a positive step to the person you want to become or the goal you want to achieve? And it's not about comparing your success based on somebody else's performance or routine or habit or their output. It's about where are you now and what's an actual progressive first step for you. For some people that want to lose weight, it could just be downloading MyFitnessPal. Just downloading MyFitnessPal and creating an account is a positive first step. But for someone that's been in the gym for 10 years that knows what they're doing, actually tracking and weighing and measuring food is their natural progressive first step. Neither's more important than the other. They're equally important to those two different people, because for them, that is their first step into the journey that they want to take.
No, brilliant, man. Love those insights. But one thing that's been in my head for the last few minutes is that you mentioned at the start of this, the why behind the 48. But I did want to ask you as well, because you mentioned that you used to be involved in rugby and strongman, and you probably attached a bit of your identity to that. Whereas now that has probably slightly morphed and changed. What is your overall why now behind your own personal training? Like marathons and everything else aside, challenges aside, what is your why behind, if you weren't at any marathons coming up, what would make you go to the gym in the morning? Or do some fitness related thing?
Yeah, my why is, I think, my why has changed a lot over the years, and my why predominantly now is my daughter. It's a lot of people have this idea that for their children they want to leave money or wealth, and a lot of people have asked me in the past, going, "Oh, are you building these gyms and businesses to give to your daughter?" No, for me, money can be lost, it can be wasted, it can disappear in a bad business decision or a international pandemic. But what can never be taken away from you is your work ethic, your impact on the world and the community around you, and how you can be anything that you want to be. And so for me, my why is to show my baby girl that if you want to do something, if you work hard, put the hours in, put the time and effort in, then you can achieve whatever you want to be. So no matter where she finds herself in life, if she's in a career she's not happy, she actually has the trust and confidence in herself to think, actually, as long as I work hard and back myself and do the work, I can change my career, or I can be whoever I want to be. So for me, it's about trying to show my daughter that work ethic and drive and determination is really important, rather than material things or success or money. And like last night, like I'd not had a chance to fit my kettlebell workout in, so she watched some cartoons whilst I did the kettlebell workout in the corner. And she said to me, she's like, "Oh, why are you doing it?" And I was like, "Well, because if I don't do this, then I won't have as much chance to succeed at the 48." And she actually turned around to me and she's like, "Oh, at the end of the day," what was the word she used? It was just like, "I guess you can do anything you want to do as long as you put the work in, can't you?" And I was like, for a 6-year-old, that's incredibly profound. And yes, you can. So yeah, for a bit of a long rambling explanation, but that for me is my why. And again, if I can leave a mark on her in terms of showing her that work ethic, commitment, trying to help other people, trying to be a good person is a positive way of living, hopefully she'll then pay that forward. And then also the other side of it for me is to try and impact as many people positively as I can, whether that's as a coach, whether it's as a business mentor, whether it's as a charity, whatever that might be. So there's a lot of diverse whys and a lot of diverse reasons why I do lots of different things, but my primary why is my daughter.
I do love how you mentioned that it does morph and change over time, because I know we've had clients struggle with this in the past as well. When we bring up that point of why you're doing that, or what is the why behind things, and some people just don't get it, because they're like, "What do you mean? I want to lose fat. I want to lose 5 kilos." But it's not about that. It's about that layer underneath the layer, the onion, peeling the onion back analogy. Whereas,
and that, I've had people say to me that, "Oh, it's the 48. It's just an exercise in your own ego." And I'm like, I don't care how big your ego is. Running 48 marathons, like your ego is not a big enough why to run to put yourself through that. I know James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, got accused of the same. People going, "Oh, you're only doing 50 Ironmans for your own ego. You're not doing it for charity." And it's just like, no, it's not purely for charity, but it's that whole idea that there's no charitable act that is purely selfless. There is an element of selfishness in a charitable act anyway, but there's nothing wrong with that as long as that's not, for me, that's not the primary reason. The primary reason for doing it is to help others, to show my daughter around what can be achieved. I mean, I'm 105 kilos. I'm not a traditional runner. I'm going to try and do something that no runners ever done in this country. So it's to show that you don't have to be defined by who you are, or what people think you're capable of. But also selfishly, I want to test myself. My why as well is, when will I break? How will I react in adversity that I've never experienced before? How will I overcome motivational issues and pain and soreness and all the other things that come with it? So there are selfish whys that sit behind the why of the 48 as well. But the primary why is to help others. And I think that that's one of the things that people can often not answer, is like, if someone, like you say, like, oh, I want to lose 5 stone. Why? Oh, because I think I'll feel better. But why? And actually you get further down the route and it's actually they've got a poor relationship at home and there's other things that are affecting it. It's not just, well, if I lose that weight, I'll suddenly be happy. And I say this to a lot of people that I work with, is that happiness shouldn't really be a goal, because happiness is just an emotional response to a situation or an outcome. Happiness for me, and happily if other people disagree, but for me, happiness is, it's not an end state. It's just something that happens along the way. So for me, it's around trying to find as many opportunities in your life to do things that create a happiness response, but not trying to move constantly towards, oh, I just want to be happy, because you could win the lottery and then a bird craps on your car and suddenly you're not happy. So you're like, well, happiness can't be achieved. It's just something that you should experience along the journey to achieve whatever the goals are that fulfill you. But that's probably another rabbit hole for another conversation.
No, man, it's brilliant. I did have other things in mind to ask, but I just think it'll take away from the rest of the episode if we go any further into things, because like there's some very core principles that you just mentioned there about getting past mental battles, figuring out a why for yourself, and how that is the fuel to people's fire for long-term training. It's like we do goals workshops here with our clients every 90 days. So we have an annual one, which is a little bit more in depth. We figure out the why during that annual one. And then every 90 days, we just set the targets. But like, it really, those goals really nearly are irrelevant in a way if someone's why isn't formulated in that. And it's a strong motivating reason to continue down this journey, because if you don't have that why, like if you didn't have that why you just mentioned to me, are you going to be quote unquote motivated? Because I do believe that that's where true motivation comes from. Motivation is not fucking watching a video before you do your 48 marathons and run out the door screaming. It's having that strong why behind things. Like, so no, I love it, man. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I was going to say, I think your effort and input into a goal is directly related to your desire to achieve the goal. And I think if you've got constant apathy towards training, for example, like there's nothing wrong with that, but is training really that important to you? Is changing your body, is the pain of where you are less than the pain of changing? And I think that that's where a lot of people get stuck, is that they end up doing stuff because they feel that they have to or should, not because they want to. And I've said this to a few guys before, like if you're not motivated for a month, that's just a snapshot of where you are. If you're not motivated for 2 months, that's a trend. And if you're not motivated for 3 months, then that's your present reality. And now you really need to start questioning, like, why haven't you sorted your shit out, and why maybe this goal that you think that you're motivated by isn't really that motivating. Because if after that amount of time you still got complete apathy towards the journey, the process, the system, the structure, the application, the effort, then maybe it's time to consider whether that's even that relevant to you. And the problem that I think a lot of people have is that they feel like because that's what they should be doing, then they can never change their own goalposts. And I had the same when I sold Fit360. For me, the industry says that you should have more gyms, you should have more clients, you should have more turnover. But that wasn't motivating me anymore. So let's change it. Let's change the game. Let's change the goalposts. Let's do something different. And I think that's where a lot of people are scared of changing or admitting that actually this goal that they started to commit to is somebody else's goal. It's somebody else's motivating factor. It's somebody else's definition of success. It's somebody else's yardstick. And that's why I say that self-reflection is so important for anyone that's going on any kind of journey. Is why do you want to do it? Like, and are you actually applying your effort and best foot forward towards that goal? Because if you're not, then maybe the goal isn't as strong as it could be, or maybe your why isn't as defined as it needs to be. And then change the goalposts, or change your expectations, or change your behaviors. I think I put it on my Instagram not so long ago, like if your behaviors don't match your expectations, then change your expectations or change your behaviors, but stop moaning that you're not getting where you want to be. And I think that's a skill that not many of us possess.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. That's a very good one. People's expectations of things are just completely skewed when they go after certain things. So the one you mentioned a few minutes ago, the pain of staying the same needs to outweigh the pain of change. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So like the work required to get that end goal or to start working towards it, like it's we read these things in books and we read quotes online about this kind of stuff, and as cliched as it is, it's the exact stuff people need to do. Like,
yeah, but the thing with a lot of these like quotes and motivational snippets and stuff like that is like we can all read a quote and be, oh, I'm pumped up, I'm fired, let's go have a good gym session. But are we actually absorbing it? Are we actually putting it into our day to day? Are we actually questioning and going back and revisiting it regularly? And for the most part, no. When we feel a bit demotivated, we go watch a YouTube video that motivates us or fires up, or we put our favorite music on or whatever. And I think if my advice to a lot of people is like, if you read a motivating fact like that's used that as an example, like, is the pain of staying the same any less than the pain of changing? And if not, then that might be where your issue lies. Like, let's review that every 2-3 months rather than just going, oh, that's a good idea. It motivates you for one day and then you forget about it. All these motivational quotes and concepts are only useful if we actually utilize them regularly rather than just them being a one-off shot of adrenaline in the arm and away we go.
I think it was a nice way to round out that overall thing, overall episode. Is there anything you want to leave with? I know you've said a lot of motivational stuff. No, but man, it's I suppose it's summed up by what you just kind of recapped there on that. If you're not taking action on things, then fuck all is going to change. Unless you've anything else to add, let us know where people can find more about John.
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, thanks for having me on. Always good to shoot the shit and chat around various different things around the fitness world. I think the best thing in terms of if people want to support the 48 in any way, whether that's just sharing it, running your own Miles for Meals events, or coming and running and helping me in any of the runs that I'll be doing, then the best place to keep up to date is my Instagram, which is at the Bending Barbell. And then we've also got the at Miles for Meals. I think that's the username for it. Hang on, let me double check, make sure I'm giving you accurate information.
I'll have all this in the show notes page anyway, man. Not to worry about that.
Miles for Meals _UK. That's the one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's the best place to keep up to date with the 48, 48, 48. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if whenever I've done podcasts or interviews in the past, there's always questions from people that kind of it starts or prompts other conversations. So my inbox is always open. I'd love to hear from you. If anything that I've said has prompted a thought, or you disagree with it, or you want to chat about that in more detail, don't hesitate to contact me, drop me a message, and I'll always get back to every message I receive. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me.
Brilliant. Cheers, man. Thank you very much for coming on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And I wish you all the best of the 48. I'll be following that journey anyway, no doubt. So best of luck with it all, man.
Thank you very much.